Lucky American coins. Writing a variant equals document, ID equals 58321. Imagine reaching into an old jar of coins, opening a forgotten drawer, searching through a collection inherited from a family member, or simply checking the change that has been sitting untouched for years, and suddenly finding a small copper-colored American coin dated 1994. At first glance, it may appear to be nothing more than an ordinary 1-cent piece, a common Lincoln cent that millions of people have handled without giving it a second thought. But what if that tiny coin contains an unusual minting error? What if the date, lettering, surface, strike, or metal composition reveals something extraordinary? What if the coin is one of the rare examples that escaped the United States Mint with a dramatic production mistake? These are the questions that make the 1994 Lincoln cent such an interesting subject for collectors, treasure hunters, and people who enjoy searching through old coins. The possibility of finding a rare error coin is one of the reasons why even an ordinary-looking penny can attract enormous attention. At the same time, there is an important difference between an interesting coin and a genuinely valuable coin. Stories circulating online sometimes claim that a 1994 Lincoln penny with an error could be worth $253 million, making it sound like someone could discover a fortune in a handful of loose change. Such claims can be exciting, but they must be treated carefully. There is no established, credible auction record confirming that a 1994 Lincoln cent has sold for $253 million. The $253 million figure is not a verified current market value for a known 1994 penny. Real coin prices are determined by documented sales, rarity, condition, authentication, demand, and the specific characteristics of the coin. A genuine 1994-era penny can certainly be more interesting and potentially more valuable than an ordinary example, but the exact value depends entirely on what the error actually is and how important it is to collectors. That does not make the 1994 Lincoln cent boring. In fact, the opposite is true. The 1994 penny represents an important period in the long history of the Lincoln cent. By 1994, the Lincoln cent had already been in circulation for more than 7 decades. The basic portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse had become one of the most recognizable images in American coinage, while the reverse design featuring the Lincoln Memorial had been used for decades. The coin had traveled through generations of Americans, appearing in cash registers, vending machines, parking meters, piggy banks, coin jars, bank rolls, and collections. Millions of people used these coins every day, often without realizing that small differences in minting quality or production could sometimes make certain examples more desirable to collectors. The 1994 Lincoln cent is part of the long-running Lincoln cent series that began in 1909. The original Lincoln cent was introduced to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. It was historically significant because Lincoln became the first real person to appear on a regularly circulating United States coin. Before the Lincoln cent, American circulating coinage generally featured symbolic figures, allegorical representations, or personifications of liberty. Putting the portrait of a former president on a circulating coin represented an important change in American coin design. By 1994, the Lincoln cent had already passed through several major changes in composition and design. The earliest Lincoln cents were made from a bronze alloy, while the composition changed during World War II when copper was needed for military purposes. The Mint produced zinc-coated steel cents in 1943, creating one of the most famous era stories in American numismatics, when a small number of copper planchets from earlier production accidentally remained in the manufacturing system. Later, the cent returned to a bronze composition, and in 1982 the United States Mint changed the standard composition again, introducing the modern copper-plated zinc cent. This change is extremely important when discussing the 1994 penny. Unlike many older Lincoln cents, a normal 1994 cent is not a solid copper coin. It is primarily made of zinc with a thin layer of copper on the outside. The standard specifications for a 1994 Lincoln cent are approximately 19.05 mm in diameter and approximately 2.5 grams in weight. The coin has a plain edge, meaning there are no reeded lines around the edge like those found on many American dimes and quarters. The standard 1994 Lincoln cent has a composition of approximately 97.5% zinc and 2.5% copper by weight. The copper coating gives the coin its familiar reddish or brownish appearance when new, but the underlying zinc can become visible if the copper coating is damaged. This is one reason why some 1994 cents may appear unusual. A coin with exposed zinc is not automatically a rare error. It could be the result of environmental damage, corrosion, abrasion, chemical exposure, or damage that happened after the coin left the mint. Determining whether an unusual appearance is a genuine mint error or simply damage is one of the most important skills for anyone searching for valuable coins. On the obverse of the 1994 Lincoln cent is the famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln facing right. Above his head appears the inscription Liberty, while the date 1994 appears on the lower right side. The phrase "In God We Trust" is positioned along the upper portion of the design. Depending on the mint where the coin was produced, a small mint mark may appear below the date. A 1994 cent from the Philadelphia Mint generally carries no mint mark, while a coin produced at the Denver Mint bears a small D mint mark. Proof cents from the San Francisco Mint carry an S mint mark. The mint mark can be extremely important when identifying a Lincoln cent. A coin with no mint mark is not automatically rare, because Philadelphia produced enormous quantities of Lincoln cents. Likewise, a D mint mark does not automatically make a 1994 penny valuable. The S mint mark can be especially interesting because San Francisco produced proof coins intended primarily for collectors rather than ordinary circulation. Proof coins have specially prepared surfaces and are struck using methods designed to produce sharper details and, depending on the era and finish, highly reflective fields. The reverse of the 1994 Lincoln cent features the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. The building appears in the center of the coin, surrounded by the inscriptions United States of America and E pluribus unum, with the denomination 1 cent and the word cent positioned below. The Lincoln Memorial reverse was introduced in 1959 to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth, replacing the original wheat stalk reverse that had appeared from 1909 through 1958. The Lincoln Memorial design itself has an interesting hidden detail that collectors often mention. If the coin is examined under magnification, the tiny seated statue of Lincoln inside the memorial can sometimes be seen. The level of detail depends on the quality of the strike and the condition of the coin. This tiny representation is one of the fascinating features of the design and contributes to the historical character of the series. The symbols and inscriptions on the coin also tell a story. The words "In God We Trust" reflect a phrase that has appeared on United States coinage for many decades. Liberty represents one of the central ideals associated with American political and cultural identity. E pluribus unum, meaning out of many, one, is a traditional motto associated with the United States. The Lincoln Memorial on the reverse connects the coin to one of America's most recognizable national monuments and to the legacy of Abraham Lincoln. When discussing the possibility of a valuable 1994 penny, the first question should always be whether the coin is genuinely different from a normal example. A coin can look strange for many reasons. Some differences are caused by the mint during production, while others occur after the coin enters circulation. This distinction is crucial. A true mint error is generally created during the manufacturing process at the United States Mint. Examples can include off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planches, die breaks, die cracks, double dies, struck through errors, wrong planches, and other recognized production mistakes. Some errors are dramatic and easy to see, while others are subtle and require magnification or specialized equipment. One of the most writing a variant equals document ID equals 31684. The story of the 1994 Lincoln cent becomes even more fascinating when we move beyond the basic facts and begin examining the individual characteristics that can separate an ordinary coin from a potentially collectible error. For someone searching through a box of old pennies, a 1994 cent may initially appear to be one of the least exciting coins in the group. It is not an ancient coin, it is not made of precious metal, and millions of examples were produced for everyday commerce. Yet the world of error collecting teaches an important lesson: rarity does not always come from age or precious metal content. Sometimes rarity comes from a mistake. A coin produced correctly is expected to be nearly identical to every other coin produced from the same dies. The date should be properly positioned, the lettering should be complete, the edge should have the expected shape, and the metal should match the intended composition. When something goes wrong during the production process, the resulting coin can become different from the millions of normal examples around it. The first challenge for collectors is identifying whether the difference occurred at the United States Mint or after the coin entered circulation. This is the dividing line between a genuine mint error and ordinary damage. The life of a coin after it leaves the mint can be surprisingly rough. A penny can be dropped onto concrete, stepped on, squeezed in a machine, scraped across a metal surface, exposed to chemicals, buried underground, placed in water, heated, frozen, polished, painted, or intentionally modified. By the time a coin reaches a collector decades later, it may have experienced years of abuse. This is why post-mint damage is so common. A damaged coin can sometimes look more dramatic than a genuine error. A scratch across Lincoln's face may appear unusual, but it is not a mint error. A flattened edge may look like a broad strike, but if the metal shows signs of impact after production, the coin is damaged. A silver-colored surface may look like missing copper plating, but chemical exposure can create similar appearances. The collector's job is to reconstruct the coin's history. What did the coin look like when it left the mint? What happened during circulation? What characteristics remain that can reveal its original production? This is a form of detective work. One of the most important clues is the relationship between the error and the coin's design. Genuine mint errors generally affect the coin in ways that make sense according to the minting process. For example, an off-center strike produces a design that is shifted relative to the edge. A broad strike affects the shape and diameter because the collar failed to contain the planchette. A clipped planchette creates a missing portion related to the punching process. A die crack creates a raised line that corresponds to damage in the die. Post-mint damage often behaves differently. A scratch may cut across several design elements without regard to how the coin was manufactured. A grinder may remove metal unevenly. A chemical reaction may affect the entire surface rather than one specific production area. Understanding these patterns is extremely useful. Consider a hypothetical 1994 penny with a large section missing from one side. At first glance, it might appear to be a clipped planchette. But the shape of the missing section must be examined. If the missing area is smoothly curved and the remaining design shows characteristics consistent with a blanking error, the coin may deserve further attention. If the area has rough, irregular edges and obvious tool marks, it may have been damaged after minting. The difference can be subtle, and professional authentication is sometimes necessary. A genuine clipped planchette is created before the coin is struck. The blanking press punches circular pieces from a sheet of metal. If the punches overlap or if a blank is taken too close to the edge of the strip, a portion of the planchette can be missing. When the coin is later struck, the missing section remains. This can create a distinctive appearance. Collectors often examine the rim opposite the clip. Because the metal flows differently during striking, the rim may be weaker in a particular area. This feature can help support the identification of a genuine clip. The size of the clip also matters. A tiny clip may be collectible, but relatively modest in value. A large and dramatic clip can be much more desirable. If the date is clearly visible and the coin remains in good condition, collector interest may increase. But again, there is no universal price. A genuine 1994 clipped planchette could be worth more than face value, but its market price would depend on the specific characteristics and collector demand. It would not automatically be worth millions of dollars. The same principle applies to off-center strikes. The degree of off-centering is important. A coin that is only slightly off-center may not attract much attention. A coin that is dramatically off-center, with a large portion of the blank planchette visible, can be much more interesting. The position of the date is also important. Collectors generally prefer off-center coins where the date remains visible. If the date is completely missing, the coin may still be a genuine error, but its identity becomes less obvious. Imagine a 1994 cent struck approximately 40% off-center. The date remains fully visible near the edge, while part of the reverse design is missing. Such a coin would be visually dramatic. If authenticated, it could attract collectors interested in Lincoln cent errors. Now imagine another coin that is only 2% off-center. To the average person, it may look normal. Even if technically an error, the collector premium may be much smaller. This illustrates an important principle in error collecting: visibility matters. Collectors often prefer errors that can be understood immediately. A dramatic error tells its story without requiring a microscope. However, subtle errors can also be valuable if they are rare and well documented. The market is shaped by both rarity and visual appeal. This brings us to the question of multiple strikes. A multiple struck coin is created when the planchette is struck more than once. If the coin remains in the press and shifts between strikes, the second strike can create overlapping or distorted design elements. A dramatic double strike can be fascinating. On a Lincoln cent, Lincoln's portrait might appear twice, with the second image shifted from the first. The lettering may overlap. The rim may show unusual expansion. The exact appearance depends on how far the coin moved between strikes. If the second strike occurs within the collar, the coin may remain close to normal in diameter. If the coin moves outside the collar, the result can be even more dramatic. Multiple strikes are not common, and significant examples can be collectible. But mechanical doubling must be distinguished from true multiple strikes. Mechanical doubling occurs when the die or planchette shifts slightly during the striking process. This can produce flattened or shelf-like secondary images along lettering and design elements. It is often mistaken for a doubled die. The distinction is critical. A true doubled die is created during die production and can produce repeated doubling on multiple coins. Mechanical doubling occurs during striking and generally does not have the same collectible status. For the 1994 Lincoln cent, anyone who sees apparent doubling should carefully examine the shape of the secondary image. True double die characteristics can include clear separation between design elements, while mechanical doubling often appears as a flat extension. However, determining this from a casual photograph can be difficult. Specialists often use comparison images and detailed attribution techniques. The date is one of the most frequently examined areas on Lincoln cents because collectors naturally look for doubling there. But the entire coin should be examined. Doubling can appear in letters, numbers, and other design features. A coin with confirmed and significant doubling can be more desirable than an ordinary example. But the exact variety must be established before a value can be determined. This is another reason why the claim of a $253 million 1994 penny is problematic. Without knowing the exact error or variety, there is no responsible way to assign such a value. The phrase 1994 error penny covers many possible situations. It could refer to a minor die crack. It could refer to a major off-center strike. It could refer to a clipped planchette. It could refer to a broad strike. It could writing a variant equals document, ID equals 58241. The deeper we look into the 1994 Lincoln cent, the more we begin to understand why collectors continue to search through old coin jars, bank rolls, inherited collections, and forgotten boxes of change. The excitement is not simply about finding a coin that is old. It is about finding a coin that is different, understanding why it is different, and determining whether that difference was created at the United States Mint or sometime after the coin entered circulation. In the world of numismatics, that distinction can completely change the story and sometimes dramatically change the value. A 1994 Lincoln cent is now more than 3 decades old, but age alone does not make it rare. Millions of these coins were produced, and many remain in circulation or storage. The vast majority are ordinary examples that are worth approximately their face value. Yet within the enormous population of 1994 cents, there can be unusual pieces that escape the normal manufacturing process. Those pieces are what collectors search for. The most important thing to remember is that a rare error is not created simply because a coin looks strange. It must have characteristics that are consistent with a known minting mistake. The evidence must support the conclusion that the unusual feature existed when the coin was produced. This is why the study of errors requires patience. Imagine finding a 1994 penny with an unusual dark mark across Lincoln's portrait. At first, the mark might look like a die crack. Under magnification, however, it may turn out to be a scratch. A genuine die crack is raised above the surrounding surface, because the crack in the die created a recessed channel that filled with metal during striking. A scratch, on the other hand, removes or displaces metal from the coin itself. The two can look similar in a photograph, but their physical characteristics are different. The same principle applies to die chips. A die chip occurs when a small piece of the die breaks away. When coins are struck afterward, metal flows into the recessed area left by the missing die material. The result is a raised blob, or protrusion on the coin. A small die chip may have little market value, especially if similar examples are common. A large and dramatic die break can be much more desirable. The location of the die break also matters. If it affects a major part of Lincoln's portrait, the lettering, or the rim, collectors may find it more visually interesting. The size and clarity of an error can therefore influence collector demand. This is one of the reasons why a simple statement, such as 1994 penny error value, is not enough to determine a price. The word error describes a broad category, not a single collectible. A 1994 cent with a minor die crack is one thing. A 1994 cent with a major off-center strike is another. A 1994 cent struck on a wrong planchette is something else entirely. A 1994 cent with a genuine double die is another category. Each requires separate research. The 1994 cent also offers an excellent opportunity to study the difference between a mint error and a variety. These terms are sometimes used interchangeably by casual collectors, but they describe different phenomena. A mint error generally occurs when something goes wrong during the production process. The coin may be struck off-center, struck multiple times, struck through a foreign object, or produced on the wrong planchette. A variety, on the other hand, is typically a recurring characteristic associated with a particular die or die preparation process. A double die is a classic example of a die variety. The distinction matters because the rarity and population of each can be different. A major error might be unique or nearly unique. A die variety may appear on hundreds or thousands of coins produced from the same die. This does not mean a variety cannot be valuable. Some varieties are extremely desirable. But the method of determining rarity is different. For a 1994 Lincoln cent, collectors may therefore examine both error characteristics and variety characteristics. The first step is to determine the mint source. The absence of a mint mark on a 1994 cent generally indicates Philadelphia production. The D mint mark identifies Denver. The S mint mark is associated with San Francisco proof production. The mint mark itself is not automatically rare. This is important because many inexperienced collectors assume that any unusual mint mark must indicate a valuable coin. In reality, the mint mark is simply one part of the coin's identity. The next step is condition. Condition can be described in general terms such as circulated or uncirculated, but professional grading uses a more precise scale. Coins can receive numerical grades that reflect their preservation, with higher grades generally indicating better condition. A heavily circulated 1994 cent may show wear on Lincoln's hair, cheek, jaw, and other high points. The reverse may also show wear on the Lincoln memorial and lettering. An uncirculated coin should retain its original mint surface and show no evidence of circulation wear. But even among uncirculated coins, there can be substantial differences. A coin with contact marks, spots, discoloration, or scratches may be less desirable than a coin with clean surfaces. For error coins, however, the error itself can sometimes outweigh the importance of grade. A spectacular off-center strike in a moderate grade may be more desirable than a pristine coin with a tiny and common die crack. This is one reason error collecting differs from conventional date and mint collecting. Collectors of regular coins may focus heavily on grade. Error collectors may focus more heavily on the nature, size, and visibility of the error. The ideal coin can have both. A major error in exceptional condition can be especially desirable. This combination is rare. Consider a hypothetical 1994 cent with a dramatic 60% off-center strike. The date remains visible, and the coin has only minimal circulation. The error is immediately obvious. Such a piece could attract serious interest. Now imagine a second coin with a similar off-center strike, but severe scratches, corrosion, and cleaning. The error may still be genuine, but the condition could reduce its appeal. The market would evaluate both coins differently. This illustrates why collectors should not focus on one characteristic in isolation. The same principle applies to plating errors. A 1994 cent with an incomplete copper coating may show a silvery zinc-colored surface. The temptation is to assume that it is automatically a rare mint error. But the coin must be examined carefully. The copper plating on a zinc cent is extremely thin. If the coin is damaged, the underlying zinc can become visible. A scratch can expose the zinc. A dent can break the plating. A harsh cleaning process can remove the surface. Chemical exposure can alter the copper layer. Corrosion can create holes or bubbles. All of these can produce unusual appearances. A genuine plating error is different. If the plating was improperly applied during manufacture, the copper layer may be incomplete or uneven from the beginning. The coin may show evidence of the plating process rather than damage caused later. This distinction can be difficult to make without professional experience. One useful clue is the relationship between the exposed area and the surrounding surface. If the exposed zinc appears in a location where the copper layer was never properly applied, the boundary may be smoother and more consistent with a manufacturing problem. If the exposed zinc appears along a sharp scratch or impact point, post-mint damage becomes more likely. However, this is not an absolute rule. Professional examination is the safest approach. Another interesting possibility is a missing clad or plating layer, but terminology must be used carefully. Lincoln cents from this period are copper-plated zinc, not traditional copper nickel-clad coins like certain US dimes and quarters. Therefore, collectors should be precise when describing the coin. Calling every silver-colored 1994 cent a missing clad layer can be misleading. The coin's actual composition matters. The normal 1994 cent consists of a zinc core with copper plating. The weight is approximately 2.5 grams. A suspected error should be compared against that standard. If the coin weighs significantly less, writing a variant equals document, ID equals 74126, the story of the 1994 Lincoln cent reaches its most important point when curiosity turns into careful investigation. A coin that appears ordinary at first glance can become fascinating when its details are examined closely, but the collector must always separate genuine rarity from damage, rumor, and exaggerated internet claims. The possibility of discovering a valuable error is real, but the evidence must always come before the price. The 1994 Lincoln cent belongs to a period of American coinage when the familiar Lincoln memorial design was still being produced on a copper-plated zinc planchette. By this time, the cent had already undergone a major composition change. Since 1982, the standard Lincoln cent had generally used a zinc core covered with a thin layer of copper. This change was made primarily because copper had become more expensive, making the traditional bronze composition less economical for producing the nation's 1-cent coin. The 1994 cent therefore carries a small piece of this history. It is a product of American manufacturing. It is a product of industrial technology. It is a product of the country's monetary system. And when an error occurs during its production, the coin can preserve evidence of something that went wrong inside that enormous manufacturing process. That is what makes mint errors so interesting. A normal coin tells us what the mint intended to produce. An error coin can sometimes tell us what actually happened. The difference may be tiny. It may be visible only under magnification. Or it may be dramatic enough to be immediately obvious. A coin can leave the press with a small die crack that nobody notices. Another can be struck significantly off-center. Another may receive multiple strikes. Another may be struck through a foreign substance. Another may be produced on the wrong planchette. Each error represents a different moment in the manufacturing process. This is why collectors often describe error coins as mistakes with a story. The story begins with the blank planchette. Before a 1994 cent could become a finished coin, the metal had to be prepared and processed. Sheets of the appropriate material were produced, and circular blanks were punched from those sheets. These blanks were then processed and prepared for striking. The blank was not yet a coin. It had no date. It had no portrait. It had no Lincoln memorial. It had no lettering. It was simply a piece of prepared metal. The blank then entered the striking process. The dies carried the design. The planchette was placed between them. Pressure was applied. The metal flowed into the recessed and raised areas of the dies. The rim was formed. And the finished Lincoln cent emerged. When everything worked correctly, the result was a normal 1994 cent. When something went wrong, the result could be an error. The error could happen before striking. It could happen during striking. Or it could be related to the dies themselves. This basic understanding is essential for anyone examining a suspected error. If the error happened before striking, the planchette itself may provide evidence. If the error happened during striking, the relationship between the dies and planchette may provide evidence. If the error originated from the dies, repeated characteristics may appear on multiple coins. This is why collectors do not simply ask, "Does this coin look unusual?" They ask, "What event could have created this appearance?" That question is the key to serious analysis. Suppose you discover a 1994 cent that is noticeably smaller than a normal penny. The first instinct might be to assume it was struck on a smaller planchette. But there are other possibilities. Perhaps the coin was damaged. Perhaps it was squeezed. Perhaps the edge was altered. Perhaps the photograph creates an optical illusion. The collector must therefore compare the coin against a known normal example. Measure it. Weigh it. Examine the edge. Look at the surface. Only then can a possible explanation begin to emerge. The same process applies to a coin that appears unusually large. A broad strike could cause a coin to spread outward because the collar failed to properly contain the planchette during striking. A coin could also be mechanically distorted after leaving the mint. The two possibilities can sometimes look surprisingly similar. The difference is in the evidence. A genuine broad strike generally retains characteristics of the striking process. Post-mint damage usually leaves evidence of pressure, impact, or manipulation that occurred after the coin was produced. The edge can be especially helpful. The shape of the rim can reveal whether the metal expanded during striking or was pushed outward later. This is why collectors should never judge an error from one photograph alone. A coin must be examined from every angle. The obverse, the reverse, the edge, the rim, the surfaces, the weight, the dimensions. Every part contributes to the story. One of the most exciting discoveries would be a 1994 cent with a major off-center strike. Imagine a coin where the design is dramatically shifted toward one side, leaving a large crescent-shaped area of blank planchette visible. The date remains clearly readable, while part of the Lincoln Memorial design is missing from the opposite side. Such a coin would immediately attract attention. The degree of off-centering matters. A very minor shift may have little premium. A substantial shift can be much more interesting. A dramatic shift with the full date visible can be particularly desirable. This is because the date provides identification. Collectors know exactly what they are looking at. A 1994 cent with a clearly visible date and a dramatic off-center strike can tell its story instantly. The coin itself becomes a visual record of the production mistake. But even then, the value must be determined by the market. There is no automatic price attached to every off-center strike. The percentage of off-centering matters. The condition matters. The visibility of the date matters. The mint mark matters. The overall appearance matters. And most importantly, collector demand matters. The same principle applies to multiple strikes. A genuine multiple-struck coin can be spectacular. The first strike creates the original design. The coin then moves. A second strike occurs. The design may overlap. Lincoln's portrait may appear displaced. The lettering may show repeated images. The rim may become distorted. If the coin moves significantly between strikes, the result can be dramatic. A multiple-struck 1994 cent with clear evidence of both strikes could be a fascinating collectible. However, a coin that simply appears to have doubled lettering is not automatically a multiple strike. The collector must determine whether the second image represents a separate strike, a double die, mechanical doubling, or damage. These are very different phenomena. A true double die originates during die creation. Mechanical doubling occurs during the striking process, when there is movement between the die and planchette. A multiple strike involves the planchette being struck more than once. Post-mint damage occurs after the coin leaves the mint. Four coins can therefore appear unusual for four completely different reasons. Understanding the difference is essential. The 1994 cent also provides an opportunity to discuss the importance of die varieties. Collectors sometimes search for doubled lettering on the date or inscriptions. But not every apparent doubling is valuable. Mechanical doubling is often mistaken for a doubled die. This can lead to unrealistic expectations. A true double die may show separation between the primary design and the secondary image. The shape and direction of the doubling can provide clues. Mechanical doubling often looks flatter. It may appear like a shelf or step. The secondary image may be less distinct. The overall appearance can be less dramatic than a true double die. Professional attribution may be necessary when the distinction is uncertain. This is especially important when someone believes a coin may be worth a substantial amount. The cost of expert examination can be small compared with the potential financial consequences of